Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back. Another day, another stream, and another fabulous guest. And today we have the fabulous Yoystan, aka Man of the West, here. It's been a year, Yoystan.
It has been. Thank you so much for having me back. I honestly, our last conversation, the archetypes of heroes in Tolkien's works, was like one of my favorite collabs that I've ever done. So thank you so much. Thanks for
Oh.
letting me be here. It's good to see everybody.
Yay. So, Yosin, today I asked you because I had a really great stream with Corey Olsen. Shout out to the Tolkien professor,
Yeah.
by the way. And yeah, Corey and I talked about the queens. I called it, I was a bit clickbaity, and I called it the evil and terrible queens of Numenor. So, you need to get some clickbait going on, but
Absolutely.
somewhere not so great. And yeah, so I decided and asked Joyson to join me on a discussion about the Kings of Númenor. So, Joyson, what do we call it then? The
I feel
horrendous.
I feel like I mean these are way worse than any of the queens really were. So
Mm-hmm.
just
Shout out to Ar-Pharazon.
yeah, absolutely. Scale it up 10 notches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll find a good clickbaity title, but
Love it.
yes, but we are talking about the male rulers of Numenor, and well, overall in total there were 25 rulers, and we had I'm really bad at math, but 22 kings, male rulers, because we had 3 queens. Yes,
Yeah.
so that should be okay. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
still the teacher. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's
I'm really
right.
bad
That's
at math.
faster math than I can do. So
Yes, and well, some were good, some were okay, some didn't
Mhm.
care, and some were really bad. And I do think we can see we start at literally the highest point, and then
Yeah.
it's slowly. There's a little bump, with one of the kings. We will talk about him, Tar-Palantir. There's a
Mhm.
little bump in the road, and it goes up high again. But yeah, overall, I
But
think we
he's
can
not
agree
enough. Yeah, he's not
he's
enough
not
to save.
enough. No, and we can agree. It started really well, and this was the promised island for the promised race of men. But
Mhm.
listen, what happened?
Yeah, so I want to say it was the year 30 of the Second Age. That sounds about right.
Yes.
That
Mhm.
Numenor rises, and Elros, the brother of Elrond, son of Eärendil and Elwing, leads his people, the Edain, to Numenor, following the star of his father. And the
Mm.
Edain become the Dunedain, and Elros rules for like 410
Yes.
years,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, leaving his son, who would be, he technically still is the next king,
Hmm.
Tar-Vardamir,
Hmm.
to pretty much completely pass it on. And then
Yeah.
it starts from there.
Hmm. Exactly. So, and poor son, I think he just literally ruled for
Yeah.
1 year, which but when your father is like a half elf, it kind of makes
Yeah,
sense.
a little unfair. It even says, I think, yeah, on Tolkien Gateway here, which is kind of, I've got my chart of all the kings.
Hmm.
His rule was only titular. It was only just in
Yes.
title, and
Yeah.
so I don't even know if he ruled for a year. I think he received the scepter and then passed it right to his son.
Yeah. Yeah. The date basically says a year, but you're right, they have to, write something down a year. He in name ruled. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think, and first question maybe here, it just came to me. Do you think, because obviously, the gods gave them this blessed island, and we know the elves, they gave them a lot of presents, also coming from Valinor, right? So they
Mhm.
had a lot of special things in Numenor. Do you think that the age of everyone's brother, of Elros, had anything to do with the island itself?
Ooh,
Because we see, yeah, just the
interesting.
thing is, because we know, Luthien, she then became re-embodied, and but I mean, the case is a bit different. Maybe we can't really
Mhm.
compare, but we know of her, becoming a human, and his choice was also to become human. But I think he lived a way longer life than Luthien. Is it maybe due to being on this island
Hmm.
so close to the Undying Lands? Is that
That would make sense. Proximity to the Eldar and to the Valar.
Mhm.
That would make a lot of sense. I also see it in a very Tolkienian sense of virtue,
Yeah,
because with the gradual decline of Numenor and of its kings,
yeah,
in virtue, we also see
yeah.
that decline in their age span.
Yes, yes.
It could be that, excuse me, could be that proximity to the elves and to the west and everything
Mhm.
changed their lifespan. But I would also be
Yeah.
curious, if the lifespan of general Numenorians at that time
Mhm.
was longer than Numenorians hence, you know?
Yeah. 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 No, we don't know. I don't know. Have you read the new book? Because I still haven't. I don't know. Maybe there is an info. Did you?
I've read parts,
Nature?
the
Yeah.
dancing Numenorian bears, but
That
yeah.
is yeah, okay. So next year we do a stream about the dancing bears because that is literally and like they were like angry or you can make them really angry or
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
can't
We have
laugh. You can't laugh at them. You have to like respectfully like nod, and
yeah.
I think if you laugh, then they get angry.
Okay, so for both of us it would end in a
Yeah, no, we're
catastrophe because
we're
we would laugh at these dancing bears.
absolutely already ended in disrespect here.
Yep. You're
um,
never invited again, Yoystan.
absolutely. But
Okay, so yeah.
I was gonna say it is interesting talking about the aging because yeah, it
Yes.
lowers and everything. And as we mentioned, Tar-Palantir, how
Yeah.
um the second to last king of Numenor, he wasn't enough. He repented for kind of the deeds of his people and the deeds of his
Mhm,
forefathers that have
mhm,
turned against the Valar. But
mhm.
even his lifespan and his rule was not
Yeah.
anything crazy, anything abundant. He really couldn't turn the tide.
No.
Um, but still, some of these early kings lived longer and ruled longer than
Mhm,
Aragorn, and
mhm.
Aragorn, who
Yeah.
restored the virtue of Numenor.
Yeah. Yeah, but so the thinning down of the blood and the bloodlines,
Mm,
because if you remember, for Aragorn's father, that was a very important, him marrying Gilraine, I think his mother's
yeah,
name was. Yeah, and I think his father, so Aragorn's grandfather, don't know his name, sorry.
Eredor.
Um, yes, yeah. He okay, yeah, he always says father. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think he was like, I don't know if her blood is kind of pure enough or something like that. Wasn't and we know of the Gondorians. Remember all the
Yes.
Gondorians because they were literally, they didn't want to marry Northmen. They literally inbred a little bit because they just wanted to marry Dunedain. So the bloodline
Yeah.
was pure, but it was also due to age because when we go to Aldarion and Erendis, remember,
Mhm.
Aldarion's mother said, Erendis doesn't have a lifespan as you have.
Yeah. But that's tough because like he's of the line of kings, and
Yes.
no one has the lifespan of the line of kings.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting, and I wonder at because they fought that Gondorian civil war,
Yes.
in part
Yeah.
because of that blood and the
Yeah.
mixing with the middlemen. But I do
Yeah.
wonder. I go back and forth on this, like the validity of that elven blood and how that changes
Mm,
um, lifespans and everything. Because I
yeah.
wonder how long Eldarion, the son of Aragorn, and
Hmm.
Arwen, how long he
Hmm.
lived because he was technically really half elven. Um,
Oh, Anarian. Yeah. 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 I don't. Do we know it from the
we
Annals of the Kings? I
we
don't.
don't. I think that was too. It's too far. I know he was coming
Yeah.
close to the end of his reign during the New Shadow. That was
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
Tolkien's idea.
Yeah.
Um, but I wonder he still didn't live as long as Elros did, the first king of
Mm.
Numenor, not close
Yeah.
to 500 years or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely in part to do with that elven blood, but again, also the virtue of,
I think so. Yeah.
yeah, of
Yeah. It's
what
like graced by the gods. God
exactly.
basically allows you, to continue on. I think this is the idea behind it, or the concept maybe behind it. Yeah. Yeah, but interesting. I think the queen, I don't remember which queen. So she was a bit further down the line. And I think,
Mhm.
is it Tartaperian? Not sure. She had the second longest lifespan of all the rulers, but she was way down the line. She
Oh,
was,
she
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was like the 10th or whatever
Yeah.
ruler.
No, that's a great memory. She was the 10th according to this list.
Yeah. And okay, you have your list now.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, there are just three, so it's a good guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think either her or another queen, and it is said they had the second longest lifespan, but it was, way, way further down the line. So it's not like it declined king by king. It varied a bit, but you could see overall, you're completely right. It
Mhm.
declined.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder, um, as she was the 10th, and I think you see this with a couple Numenorians. It's usually not long, but sometimes they will live a little longer or a little less long
Hmm.
than their father who came before them.
Hmm.
I wonder what that is. It could just be genetics and it could be random,
Hmm.
but it
Hmm.
also could be how virtuous they were in life, how much they upheld the traditions of the Valar, and
Yeah.
going to Manel Tamar or Tarma, and doing the
Hmm.
rituals for Eru, all of those
Hmm.
sorts of things.
Yeah, and I also do think because during her time, Tar-Palatin, but also other rulers that we will point out today, during that time, a lot happened, and so I do
Mhm.
think they kind of need story-wise to stay alive. Coming
True.
from the author, because it wouldn't make sense. The king then changes because, especially during her reign, the rings were forged, right?
Mhm.
Then a bit later, the Nazgul for the first time appear, and all these things. So I think it is important, to and the idea was she wasn't fit to rule. She was not even interested to rule. So she kind of, gave the power to her nephew, and
Yeah.
he was kind of a shady guy. So yeah, and then that line of him of Isilmur's line took over then, because she didn't even have offspring, which also is always a bad sign in Tolkien. If your line
True.
stops continuing.
That's yeah,
um
very true.
oh, sorry, my cats are literally lurking. Everybody knows my cats always want to make an appearance.
Oh
Teddy, sit
yeah,
down.
wanting to talk about Numenorian kings.
Yes. Well, the thing is, they always lurk when they are like stage cats, and they always lurk around the corner and want to have their
It's
moment.
amazing.
Yeah. So Teddy, that was Teddy. Good. So yeah, and I also think, because we will learn, these kings have names. Tolkien gives them
Mhm.
names, and this is a bit anticlimactical, because these names basically tell us what happens with them. I find that a bit strange, and some of the
Yeah.
names, were given to them later on. I know that, but some not. So it is very interesting. One is called like the Tower Watcher and stuff.
Mhm.
So, and what did he do?
Watchtowers, yeah.
Yeah, he stood on his tower and, like, did that all day long. So yeah, the name, yeah, it's a bit foreshadowing and anticlimactical, but I think we can forgive Tolkien because it's cool. They have so many names.
Oh yeah, and I mean I really like that with I want to say it was Tar Meneldor. He was
Hmm.
the Star Watcher.
Yes, Stargazer, Star Watcher.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that's I mean it's very always impressionistic with Tolkien. It's very
Yes.
oh they liked the sea, so here's that sea name or sea name for their son because they
Yeah.
liked to sail. Um,
Yeah.
and then just translated into Elvish to sound really cool.
Yeah, true. Everything sounds cooler in Elvish. Not like in German. But yes, Tarmeneldur, let's stay on this topic for a bit, because I
Mhm.
do think he is a very important character in the Legendarium, because he was given and handed the crown, and not, and I think a lot of people agree with this theory, because he had an older sister, Silmarion, and
Mhm.
before, so he was the fifth king. And so all the other kings that followed Elros, the firstborn children were always male.
Mhm.
Um, and so for the first time, we have a girl being the firstborn, right? And as she had younger brothers, she wasn't the only offspring and daughter and child. So her brother Tar-Palantir, I don't know was his OG. It wasn't obviously his OG name,
Like
but
Iramon.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so he became the king, and I mean, do you see it as she got cheated out of the crown, and because
Yeah.
of her line comes Aragorn, right? And all
Yeah.
Isildur, all these rightful, good, and wise kings come from her line.
Although I think was it her grandfather that recognized that that was kind of that she did get cheated out because she was still given the Ring of Barahir, and
She
I
was, yes,
also
the
have to
heirlooms went to her. Yeah,
yeah, Narsil. I have to imagine that
yeah,
some of these in recognition that they didn't have that law yet to allow
yeah.
um either to rule. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's interesting because if there had been no thought that there had been kind of that cheap law or anything, I
Hmm.
imagine all the heirlooms would have gone to Meneldor.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes, when in like, the European royal houses, I
Hmm.
do think that the second and third born obviously also get things, but the
Yeah.
main, because this is like Elros specifically brought these heirlooms. I think he even brought the sword of Turgon, the king of Gondolin. I think he brought the sword. He brought the ring
Oh.
of Barahir, and he
Oh, it
brought an
was.
axe.
I think it was.
Some,
Was it the sword of Thingol? Um,
oh, was it Thingol's sword?
yeah, because Torgon's was Glamdring, right? So I think it was Thingol's sword Aronruth.
Yes, it's thing.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, it's not Turgon. Yeah, sorry, I just wrote a
No,
video
you're totally
about
good.
Turgon, so um, yes, his sword. But so
Mhm.
that is so very specific,
It
right?
is.
Yeah, and
And
so
yeah, I know the king kept that sword because I want to
mhm.
say that sword's story ends when Ar-Pharazôn
Yes,
goes to Valinor.
yeah,
But still, Narsil, which I imagine was at some point being passed down or
yeah,
something, like it would still go to um, Silmaril's
hmm,
line,
hmm,
and even the ring that signifies the friendship with the house
yes,
of Finarfin and Finrod. That
yeah,
also it's very interesting because you can even just see the kind of collapse already beginning to happen with the friendship of the elves going into a different
yes.
line, the lords of Andunier.
Yeah, yeah. And the important thing is, the ring, I would assume that Finrod brought the ring from Valinor even. I don't think
Hmm.
he forged it in Middle-earth. I think it's even from Valinor. So you then again see, the lords of Andunia, they had all these, because they lived at the most western part, right, of the island. And so they were close to the Valar. So it's very symbolic, basically, what
Yeah,
Tolkien tells
absolutely.
us. But Tarmeneldor also was important because he is the stargazer, right?
Yeah,
Star watcher, whatever
yeah.
Tolkien says.
He's the
Yeah,
star guy. Yeah.
the star guy, yes, the stargazer, whatever. And this also changed because he is literally one of the last ones that looks up, right?
Hmm.
Who is up
Mm.
there? Earendil is up there, the guy,
Mhm.
related to him, but also the guy who sailed to Valinor, right? But he looks
Yes.
up, and the others start, and this is what Tolkien tells us, there are a lot of kings later on, and they look west.
West.
Did I just look west? I look to Men of the West. Now I have to.
Oh, nice. That
Haha.
makes sense. Oh,
um,
wow, that's very symbolic. That's very interesting. Yeah. Um,
yes.
and I
Yeah.
mean, even looking east as well towards Middle Earth,
Yeah.
Like Aldarion, his son did. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I want colonies to begin. I want to start making places in Middle Earth, taking resources, these sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, so it's fascinating, in the beginning days, as you said, they were very humble. They trusted everything the Valar told them, right?
Yeah.
Because their ancestor, was even partly a Maiar still.
Hmm.
But yeah, so it is really interesting that then their view changed, and those were the first signs before they did anything, right? Their gaze, like
Yeah. And it's been something I've been reflecting on a lot recently. I read a couple months ago the conversation of Finrod and Andraith.
oh god, yes, it's so
It,
beautiful. I
it
still don't
is.
understand it though.
No, and I don't think I do either, to be honest. But the philosopher and metaphysician in me is always drawn back to what they discuss, and how
Yeah.
Andraith sort of alongside her fellow Adine
Hmm.
blame Morgoth
Yeah.
for the evil of death. And Finrod tries to explain, no, it's a gift given to you by Eru, and you can't confuse Eru and Morgoth. But there's
Yeah.
this kind of implicit idea that if they defeat Morgoth, they defeat death, and so they won't have to
Hmm.
die anymore. So it makes
Hmm.
sense that after the defeat of Morgoth, oh, we've got our king, we've got our island, we don't have to fear death anymore because we defeated the concept of death. But even after
Hmm.
500 years, they realize, oh, our kings and all of us, we still die.
Yeah.
No matter how long we live, we will still die. And
Yeah.
so it takes away that ideal that they're going to live forever, and so it makes sense that they start
Hmm.
looking down, that they start losing that gaze in their eyes, that hopefulness, and begin to
Hmm.
get still more begrudging against the Valar,
Hmm.
because they realize, oh, we haven't defeated death. Maybe
Yeah.
death, it lies to the west. Maybe they're the people that we have to blame for this.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
this is why Ar-Pharazôn so easily believes in his, he was kind of old still,
yeah,
old already. He didn't believe Sauron in the beginning, but then he grew a bit older. Sauron was there for 50 or 60 years. He
yeah,
grew older, and then he started to, okay, yeah, maybe he is right, and maybe, we should sail there,
yeah,
and, to but obviously he lied. But yeah,
yeah.
I find that talk so fascinating and so beautiful. Again, I don't fully understand it, but maybe Tolkien maybe it's just me, but maybe Tolkien, wanted everybody to interpret this what
Yeah.
they want it to be, or maybe try to. Sorry.
You're good. You're
The
good.
post. No, the post was just delivered. Doo-doom. I'm not cutting this out, by the way. People, like, I'm way too lazy for that anyway. So I got a parcel.
Respect, respect.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I find it so fascinating because I can relate to this. Look, they saw, okay, so our first rulers, but also themselves, it must be maybe they didn't grew 450 years, but I think they also declined. The normal, regular,
yeah,
basic Numenorian also, I think they declined as well, because we learned that later on, that tombs, and they literally had physicians looking for the code to immortality and all that in
mhm,
Numenor. So it was a bit crazy over there, and morbid. And the thing is, they saw, okay, so in the beginning days, all of us are we got to 300. And then they
yeah,
didn't know what was coming, because where would it end? Would all of them in like 3, 4, 5 generations down just get to 80? That is scary. I
yeah,
understand that, because nobody gave them a manual and said, okay, so in the next 5,000 years, everything will stay the same, and then this and this. Nobody told them that. And this
yeah,
uncertainty, being in a land in between. I think they lived in a world in between, and that's never easy. They were neither here nor there, but they knew everything what was going on in Valinor. They saw it. They had elves coming. They could basically, the guy at the tower, he could see the undying
yeah,
lands.
yeah.
Um, and that is way harder than the regular basic people in Middle Earth, because they didn't have that. So when you're not tempted, you don't want the things you see, you don't want things you don't know of.
Absolutely. And even then, it's a bit of a commentary on humanity and how we lose thankfulness for the blessings we're given every day,
Yes.
and we don't use those all the time for the betterment of the world or to
No.
help one another. I mean, so many
Yeah.
Numenorians could have gone and helped the middlemen in Middle Earth,
Yes.
help pass their gifts along, but not many of
Yeah.
them did.
No.
And so yeah, we start to lose the thankfulness and become jealous for more blessings, for more gifts, rather than be thankful for what we have and for what we are.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think they didn't realize they had really everything that they could be given. The Valar
Yes.
couldn't take away the gift of Eru, the gift of death. They couldn't touch that. They couldn't do anything like that. But
Yeah.
these Numenorians were already like 8 feet tall, strong, healthy, living for a long time, very smart. They had it all.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think, because you mentioned, them going to Middle Earth, and that started with the son of the king for the
Yeah.
first time. So for 500 or 600 years, they lived, I would say, kind of blissful, happy life on the island. And
Mhm.
I do think going to Middle Earth also changed them in a
Yeah.
bad way. It's not that they, started just the colonizing and all that. It changed them because they realized we're kind of gods amongst men,
Yeah.
because they treated, and this is why they grew arrogant against the people living in Middle Earth. And you can still see that in the people of Gondor. We were just
Mhm.
talking about that example. You can a teeny tiny bit see that in Arnor, right? What
Yeah.
happened there. And I do think they even brought that after the downfall back to Middle Earth. And because they realized we are special, just like you said, we are taller, we are prettier, we are wiser, we
Yeah.
know more. And it is, they came to Middle Earth and they saw they're just, they lived like in the industrialization, and then they
Mhm.
came back to the Dark Ages. Basically, Middle Earth
Yeah.
was the Dark Ages.
And rather than like help, give people resources, help give them technology or teaching,
Yeah.
or pretty
No.
much what the elves did for men in the first age. The
Yeah.
Numenorians did not do that for other men in the
No.
second age.
No.
And I think this is a storyline that just runs a very subtle storyline that runs all the way to find its completion in Aragorn, who does
Mm-hmm.
have maybe a lesser version of these gifts, as Numenor was
Yeah.
still very far away, but
Yeah.
he realizes that these gifts don't mean he can imperialize or dominate
Yeah.
or even be lazy. He's got to work harder to
Yeah.
help people because he's given this time and these gifts, healing, the hands of healing, and he can do more. So he
Yeah.
does do more. And
Yeah.
then he recognizes that in the kind of the end of the Andraith and Finrod philosophy, that
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not Morgoth who caused them to die. It's not the Valar that caused them to die, but it's just the natural order, and it was the gift to
Mm-hmm.
give back, as Aragorn states.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny because if Aragorn had been in the early parts of Numenor, he perhaps wouldn't have even been the wisest Numenorian, but he was still much wiser than many of the Numenorians to come
Yeah.
after Menelder and Tar-Alendiel and the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And it was again, but the thing is, I felt always like Aldarion coming to Middle Earth. He was like a kid in a candy shop, right?
Yeah,
Because this was a whole new game, and they were on this island, and that is the thing. I think, look, they are all roots back to the Noldor. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah,
But they had Noldor blood in them, and they are, the explorers, discoverers, and all that.
yeah,
And they were also a bit restless. And I do think I see that a lot in many of these kings. But then you live on a teeny tiny island compared, to the vast lands of Middle Earth. It was a bit like the elves felt, right, coming from the Undying Lands to
yeah,
Middle Earth. And they, yeah, but obviously their place of rule always stayed Numenor, because it was symbolic in a way,
yeah,
because it was so close to the west, right? And the elves still came. The elves didn't come, not that I know, to Londaer or all these ports they
yeah,
created. That didn't happen. They came always to Numenor, because that
yeah.
was the blessed island. Yeah.
Absolutely, and them being welcomed to Numenor and to these places, it
Yeah.
was that sign of friendship coming over the sea from
Mm-hmm.
Tol Eressëa to
Mm-hmm.
give gifts such as the white tree, such as the seedling
Yes.
of Nemloth the Fair, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
And the birds.
yeah,
Erendis got these really cool birds that always did sing, but then, the birds disappeared, or she freed them and they disappeared. Bad sign, bad sign. When the birds are leaving, this
very
is
bad
not a good
sign.
sign, people.
I mean, and that's something I haven't realized before with the birds. I mean, that's a symbol of Elwing, right? I mean, the
Yes.
the first
Yeah.
king's mother,
Yes.
and and them being released, I mean, that's a very bad omen, especially when it's your first king's mother's symbol, these white
Yeah.
birds.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she basically did let go of them, and so and this is very often like like prophet, like the eagles. The eagles also left Numenor at one
Yeah.
point, and so I don't think it was free will. I'm pretty sure like Mandos was like, okay, like let's
Yeah.
give up on this BS. So yeah.
At what point do you think they hit the
Oh,
point of no
I
return?
damn it. I okay, so I made note because yes, I made notes. Well, the thing is, you might think it was Tar-Palantir, but it must be before him.
Yeah, because he tried his best throughout his
He
entire
tried.
rule to save them, and he couldn't do anything to reverse it. So it
No,
had to be
no.
before him.
Yeah, but which king? Because they were all like seriously the three, four before him. I think since they changed, prefix.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
prefix?
Yep.
Yeah, from the Elvish to the Anduniac name. So basically from Tar to Ar.
Mhm.
That makes sense. I don't know which king it exactly was that changed it. You probably have it
Tar
in your.
Yeah, it was Tar Kalmakil.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Um and
But what do
he
you think? Who is it?
No, I think actually you're right. I think when they changed the language, I would totally agree with that because they became even
Yeah.
the etymologies became arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
It almost became mocking to the lords of the West. Wasn't Ar-Pharazon?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that literally Lord of the West, or it was
He called himself. Yes,
Yeah,
he did. Yeah.
so I think when they changed the language, and then when they also banned the speaking of Quenya, and when the
Yes.
elves weren't able to visit, so I think it was Ar and Dunakor. I think that was probably around the time when there was the point of no return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we know that Tolkien. Sadly, I didn't. Sorry, I'm not really prepared for this, but there was one king who basically also forbade the elves to even have, to
Yeah,
come and that wasn't Ar-Pharazôn. That was before, I
that
think.
was no. You're right. And actually, so sorry, this I made a mistake. Sorry, and Ar Adunakor, that literally means Lord of the
Hmm.
West.
Hmm.
I
So
think it
that's
was
the 20th king.
20th king, and
Hmm.
he didn't even take a Quenya name. The last two kings, they took a both
Hmm.
Andunik or yeah, and
Hmm.
Quenya name. He didn't even bother with the Quenya name, just took the
Yeah.
Adunik, and
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that was the point of no return, and
Hmm.
I can't remember when elves couldn't come at all. Maybe that was
Yeah.
our Gimmelzor, but
Yeah.
because they visited in secret for a couple
They did.
generations.
Yes. And we now even learn with the new show, apparently Galadriel comes to
Mhm.
Numenor or something like that. I don't know if this is all true. We don't know. I think you
Yeah,
did
no
that.
idea.
Didn't you do the stream with the
I
fellowship
did.
about that? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's curious. I'm curious to see what king receives her, or if it's queen at that time, or what, because
I
certain
think
kings would just
Palantir.
yeah, it
Yeah.
could be Tar-Palantir, but even then, like there would be people that just the sight of an elf would rile them up to combat, and they would
Yeah.
attempt to try to kill Galadriel, which would be folly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see at what point that will happen.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, that's part of the Kings of Númenor subject at large with the Amazon show is if they're doing the entirety of the Second Age, I'm curious to see which kings and queens we will see, but also if they will
Mhm.
stick around long. If they spend like three
Yeah.
episodes doing the forging of the rings, and then it's fast forward 1,000 years later, how attached we will get to the Numenorians until the end of Numenor. I'm very curious to see that.
I mean, I would be kind of sad, if
Mhm.
25 kings and is no longer the rulers, because there were some queens as well. 25
Yeah.
rulers is no longer canon, and it's like 10 because they have to shorten the timeline. I
Yeah.
don't. Let's see how they. Yeah, that is a bit of my concern, because as you say, cinematic wise, it makes sense. You start to feel for a character. You want to see
Yeah.
him developing. You want to see him fail, succeed, redeem, whatever. But
Yep.
if you just see him for one episode on your screen, you don't really care about that
Yeah.
person. So yeah, that's a bit. And if you have 25 rulers, like that's a bit difficult.
Absolutely.
um
Yeah.
you just remembered one name, and then his name is like it's a new name again to learn. So no, not going
It's
to
like,
happen.
oh,
But I
yeah.
foresee lots of Funkos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could see like a bunch of meme pages about each king.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so something else also happens in Numenor, and I want to know you if this theory speaks to you. So we learn the shadow falls on Numenor
Mhm.
earlier than
Yeah.
Ar-Pharazon's reign, earlier than Gimilzor's reign. So the last, and the bad kings be in between Palantir. So the shadow falls on Numenor way before that.
Mhm.
And do you think, and Tolkien specifically says Sauron is the shadow. So he very, very often tells
Yeah.
us, that he is the shadow. And Tolkien was a linguist, right? He could have had gazillions of words. He didn't have to use the shadow fell for the first time on Numenor.
Mm.
Do you think that Sauron, who was a shapeshifter, right?
Yeah.
He could take on any form he liked. He could be an ambassador from Middle-earth. He could basically say, I'm a Valar or a Maiar or whatever elf from the
Yeah.
Undying Lands. He knew everything, right? He knew how to trick these people. Didn't know as much as he did. Do you think the shadow fell on Numenor means Sauron was there before and influenced a bit of what happened?
It it's a great theory. I really like that. And
Yeah.
it's possible that, like, I know in the show Galadriel, the rumor is Galadriel's going to travel with a certain ambassador among men. It could be that that's Sauron as well, but
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it might give that theory credence for sure.
Yeah.
I guess we have to be careful when we refer to the shadow as, is it capital S shadow or is it lowercase s shadow? Um,
Oh, okay.
because I think this is how I take it, at least, because
Hmm.
capital S shadow is Sauron,
Would be Sauron. Yeah.
but I think lowercase s shadow is the fear of death, is
Yeah.
the hatred of
Yeah. It's a
elves and elvenkind.
day's
Yeah,
darkening. Yeah.
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 And that began, I mean, even just the jealousy of the elves began, I want to say around Tar Ministier's time, when they came and
Yes.
helped Gilgalad defeat Sauron in the War of the Elves. And Sauron,
Yeah.
um, they came and they helped, and then they kind of saw the elves up close in Middle Earth, and I think they realized, oh, you're immortal, like not us
Mhm.
though. Yeah, I think it started to fall around there, around that time.
Yeah. And they saw, they established realms there. They lived an okay life. But I do think the whole Gilgalad and friendship with Numenor was actually fruitful for both.
Yeah, yeah,
But no, obviously they saw things. They didn't, again, they were for 600 years, just living on their blessed island, didn't care, didn't know a lot, just a few elves that did travel there once in a while. But they were just amongst themselves, like how Tolkien described it. The roads weren't paved, they just rode on horses. It was,
yeah.
like you imagine a very idyllic country life. That's how I imagine Numenor in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the cities, like very, very early on, just these kind of beautiful encampments amongst this island
Yeah,
towards the center, towards
yeah,
Manel Tarma, and
hmm,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And it's interesting to speak, if we're speaking about the sort of rustic versus I guess, somewhat technological or futuristic
Yes.
Numenorians. I
Yeah.
want to say the Druidine, some of the most rustic folk in Middle Earth ever, the
Hmm.
Woses. I want to say that they lived in Numenor as well, right?
Yes, they were. Yeah, there were some in Numenor. Yes, and apparently they even had slaves there, which is a bit weird. I don't know when and
The
how.
the Numenorians had slaves, or the
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
that is very unfortunate with like how the imperialistic side of Numenor
Colonization.
developed. Yeah,
Yeah.
the colonization, the more them coming in towards Anfalas and Umbar and
Hmm.
all of these places later
Yeah.
on in the history. It
Hmm.
makes sense. Like they were taking resources, and it makes sense that their evil overtook them. And I mean, these
Hmm.
people became afraid of the
Yeah.
Numenorians, and so
Yeah.
it's too bad because I've always wondered if Numenor was supposed to. I know Tolkien doesn't like the
Allegory. Yeah.
symbolisms and
Yes.
allegories and everything,
Yeah.
but it's very Roman. It's a very Roman kind of society
Yes.
in many ways, and the
Hmm.
imperialism and how they overtook a lot of the coasts of Middle Earth. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm German. Not that I personally know, but this is what the Romans did. They
yeah,
came, they had, they were in full gear. They knew how to fight, and those were, like basically barbaric people living in huts, right? So
yeah,
that was, and there was the greatest civilization, during that time. So yes, it was very similar. You're completely right, and I do think Tolkien, because even Aldarion, who I think in the beginning had good intentions, but he chopped down all the wood, right?
he did.
That's not so. That's not so good,
Yeah,
because his father forbade him to chop down the wood in Numenor, so he could
yeah.
no longer travel and build more ships to travel more. So he was like, "Oh, cool! Then I'm getting it. Then I'm getting my timber from Middle Earth."
Yeah, and
Um,
it lets me stay in Middle Earth longer, so sounds good. Yeah, I mean, the symbol of even just the destruction of trees in
yeah,
Tolkien's
yeah,
works is yeah, it's a very negative sign. And
yeah.
to be honest, I think the Kings of Númenor, especially, their greatest vice was ambition to some degree. I
Hmm.
mean, all of them were ambitious about different things. Some
Yes.
about military, some about colonization, some about
Yeah.
resource and economic expansion,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, they all fell to their vices to some degree,
Yeah.
especially the later ones.
Yeah, definitely. And we even have one. He just comes to my mind. I'm just looking at the chart of the kings. I think Telemachus, I think the 15th ruler, he was known for his love for Mithril. So I didn't know. I didn't know that. I was looking that up for a
Yeah,
video when I wrote my video on the kings and queens. And that is so. Did you know that they had Mithril in
I
Numenor? With
always forget about that because I know even that was a tradition that passed down into Gondor. The helmets of the Tower
yes,
Guard had
yeah,
that mithril in it, so it
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, again, yeah, that vice of they fall to whatever ambitions that they have, and so
Hmm.
for him, it was greed over
Yeah.
over silver and mithril.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it is very, in the beginning, you feel like all they wanted, a lot of the kings were looking for knowledge and wisdom, right? And the elves brought that, and they had the tower, and they wanted to understand the stars, and they built their kingdom
Yeah.
basically. But then that knowledge and wisdom turned to wealth and ruling, right? Ruling
It
over
did.
others.
Yeah.
And that is like, so this whole declining. So the richer, but the perversion of all this is Numenor got more powerful. They got what they wanted. They got what they wished for. But morally, they completely declined.
Yeah. And
Which is
it's interesting you bring up morality, virtue. In
Mhm,
Tolkien, it seems like there's very much a dichotomy of virtue, and maybe these two run together very well, in fact, as
mhm,
well, because the
mhm,
wisest people that we see throughout all of the works, Aragorn, Faramir, Gandalf, they all
mhm.
have this sense of being able to be far sighted,
Yes.
to see people's inner workings, to be able to
Mhm,
look to the Valar, look towards the elves, and try
mhm,
to exude those people very well. That's kind of
mhm,
wisdom. But then you also have
mhm,
this other side of virtue in Tolkien's works, which is simplicity. It's the
mhm.
hobbits like trimming their
Yeah.
garden and everything like that.
Mhm,
And so at some point, the Numenorians lost both sides
Yes.
of that virtuous coin. You know, they didn't have either. They weren't farsighted, but they also weren't simple people. They were,
Yeah, but
yeah,
it is hard, because the thing is, the industrialization
yeah,
went, it happened in Numenor, and we even there, there are versions of they had flying steel ships at one point, right?
yeah,
So, and the way he describes their bows and arrows is a bit like, was that a cannon? It sounds a bit like, like they
yeah,
had steel bows and they could fly like very, very. This is nothing how even Noldorian warriors, who are good craftsmen, or even the dwarves who are really good craftsmen, but this was another level that
yeah,
never again in Middle Earth, even in thousands of years, has never again been achieved. And I find that actually fascinating that humanity was never able to achieve that level of knowledge and industrialization, because knowledge as well, this is the sad part in a way, but I understand it. So what are your feelings about this? So we never hear in the Lord of the Ring books, so in the third age, let's say
yeah.
third age, we never hear of there's a school, there's a library, there is somebody educating somebody, right? There is
That's
Gandalf
true.
had to go to Gondor to find out through tapestry or old books or whatever, but
Yeah,
there weren't that many books, Yeah, but it's weird. And
it
they never
is.
talk about schools, education, universities, all that. How is this, or, how do people
Hmm.
learn? Just by your dad telling you a good night story? Maybe. And in Numenor, it is clear that there were schools, that there
Yeah,
were something like a library, like all these things, because this is like, the Library of Alexandria burning, or the,
yeah,
Atlantis drowning. All the knowledge got lost, and Tolkien makes this very clear. Um, they basically escape with their lives, and a two, three, four, five heirlooms. That's it. All the knowledge, everything is gone, and then they no longer care. Why? Why do they no longer?
yeah. It's. I mean, it's very. It's a great point. And I think Gondor might have had schools, or like Minas Tirith, or like some houses of lore,
Yeah,
but
yeah, has
and
it?
that was
Yeah,
most certainly.
yeah,
But that's like it. That was most certainly a legacy of Numenor for them.
yeah, yeah,
Because we look at Frodo and Sam, and they learned their letters, and they learned
yeah,
some, some Elvish from Bilbo. So it's very much a homeschool sort of
yeah,
deal.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, and with the Numenorian expansion being so much better than the Noldoran and then the Dwarvish and everything like that, I think that also plays into mortality. It's like we have a limited amount of
Hmm.
time to really put our ideas into place, so we're just going to develop and develop and develop.
Hmm.
Um, and so then they created all of these things that were lost in the downfall, as you say. Uh,
Hmm.
it touches on something a Tolkien scholar, Michael Drought, has talked about. One of Tolkien's
Hmm.
greatest sadness, like fears and sorrows, is that
Hmm.
lost knowledge. Like you say with the
Yeah.
Library of Alexandria, it's like there are some things that people wrote, some things that could perhaps change the world, that were lost
Yeah.
forever, and something just kind of very short-sighted by human beings, right? Burning the
Yeah.
Library of Alexandria, attacking the Valar, right? It's very short-sighted, and it
Yeah.
lost so much knowledge and wisdom. Um, and
Yeah.
perhaps that was part of the reason why it never returned, was it was a case of sorrow for men, and because men are short-sighted, they
Mm.
think about their lives, their 80-year lives, and everything like that.
Mm.
They didn't really have a ton of time, especially with the founding of Arnor and then the collapse of Arnor, the founding of Gondor, their
Hmm.
constant wars. They didn't have a lot of time to just think about
Yeah, you're
bringing
right.
these ideas back.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's true, because when the days, are easy and blissful, obviously it's easier to, found a university, or your new hobby is, to learn everything about the stars or your
Yeah.
ancestors or whatnot. And yes, obviously, when there's a new Dark Lord ruling,
Yeah.
and you basically have to survive, and this is what it is all about. Yes, it is harder to send your children to school. You rather they have to plow the fields, but
Yeah.
it is in a way like when Numenor drowned, they went back I don't know, 1,500 years or a
Yeah.
thousand years or whatever. And
Yeah.
no, but time went actually on, and there were colonies, right? So that there were Numenorians living in Middle Earth. So why did it completely? Yeah,
It's a good point. Yeah.
yeah. I
Like
was
why
always
didn't
wondering.
yeah, why didn't Pelargir become the new center of knowledge and lore
Yeah,
carried from
yeah.
Numenor? That's a good point.
And a bit of my pet theory about that is I think they were ashamed of what they did with that knowledge and that
Yeah.
potential, because
Yeah.
people then like Isildur, right, and the whole line and the Dunedain, then the even Arnor, you feel like in Arnor,
Mhm.
people for a while they succeeded expectations, and it was a good place to live for
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
And the High King was there, the seat of the High King was there, and they built great cities with Formenos and all that. But yeah, and then that disappeared again, right? So
Yeah.
and I really do think they were like, okay, so every time we try and every time we we see, we then want more, apparently, and that
Mhm.
is a failure of men. So maybe let's just survive and do the basics. That is a teeny tiny bit how I felt. Let's not get too greedy. I think
Yeah.
this is what they wanted.
I think you're completely right, and the over ambition of knowledge in Tolkien's works at large seems to be a vice.
Hmm.
I mean, in many ways, Melkor was the smartest and the wittiest of the Valar, and because
Hmm.
of that constant
Yeah,
pursuit of knowledge and wisdom,
yeah,
like it led him
yeah,
down a dark path. Same with
yeah,
Sauron.
yeah,
Yeah, because there's a level, right? There's a level of good knowledge, it seems, with
yes,
Gandalf and Elrond and Galadriel. It's
yeah,
like you can know a certain amount, but if you're overly
yeah,
ambitious, right? Elrond has that quote: "If you study too deeply into the works of the enemy, just be sure that they don't study too much into you," or whatever it is. It's like that Nietzsche
yeah,
quote.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
true. Well, that was very philosophical, but I always asked that myself because with the drowning,
yeah,
everything disappeared what they worked for, and they could have. They had that. Those were the same people, right? They could have established. They could have just rewritten the books, but they
yeah,
didn't. So all the history disappeared, and this is what I think. Even Aragorn or somebody even says that no, no, the Lord exists. Just a few songs of our ancestors. It's not like why if my house burns down, obviously I don't rebuy everything, but
yeah,
I will try to recreate things. And they never did. They literally started from scratch, but they became humble, and I think they
yeah,
saw, oh no, if we play the Lords of the West again,
yeah,
maybe that won't end too well. Maybe we're not,
yeah. I think
that's
I
not our role.
I think there was a little bit of recreation in especially the architecture. You,
Yes.
you see it in some places
Yeah.
like Anuminas
Yeah.
being the
Yeah.
city of the West and of Twilight and
Yeah.
everything like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to kind
Oh,
of
I want to
mirror
see
Andunier.
Numenor.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And the Argonauts, they
Yeah,
basically built two statues. So
yeah,
yeah. Good. So kings. Let's go back to talk a bit about the last kings, because I think
yeah.
they are just fascinating.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I think one of, for me, the fascinating ones is Ar-Gimelsor. So he's the
Yeah,
23rd king. So he is the father of said Tar-Palantir. And yeah, so he had two sons, but to his, and he loved his second son way more because he was much to his liking,
yeah,
not a faithful, and he was just, he was greedy. He was one of the worst kings.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and yeah, and so he found out, and this is really interesting, that his wife, in Silbeth, I think,
yep.
she was of the faithful, and the faithful also means she was of the line of Silmarian, the kings.
Mhm.
We talked about, like with the fifth king, like Meneldur, the line split. So Silmarian founded her own line. I'm like Italian here now for pointing all the things. So Silmarian founded the house with her husband, the House of the Lords of Andúnie. But the kings of the royal line of kings that went on from Meneldor, they married into the line of the lords of Andúnie. Obviously, not. I don't think Tolkien wanted to say like cousin married cousin, but yeah, they in a way were related generations down.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. He found out that his wife was a faithful, and he basically like banished her and his son in a way, but he knew he's my eldest and he didn't go against the law of inheritance, which kind of speaks for him. At least he feared some things. So yeah, his son said Tar-Palantir became the new king.
Yeah.
Let's talk about him because I find him so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting that in Zealbeth, like, it kind of was working against the king, and it says here that on the Tolkien Gateway article about him, Ar-Gimmelzor wed a woman renowned for her beauty, and then like didn't really think about, I guess, the political or the other ideological implications of marrying this woman. But she was able to, her one of her greatest legacies was being able to influence her son and teach him the kind of wisdom that former kings and queens had. So Tar-Palantir, the far-sighted. I love that. And
he's creepy. He's creepy AF. He is something like he is something like not like a magician, but the things he foretells, and he has some gifts. Like, this is not normal.
He does, and it's interesting. Like, one of the best gifts, I guess, that you can have in Middle Earth is being farsighted. It's always farsighted. Like, Círdan was farsighted. Malbeth the Seer before the fall of Arnor, he was farsighted. Elrond farsighted. And it's interesting. I don't know what it means to have. Even Faramir was farsighted because of his dreams, prophetic dreams. So I don't know what like the. I guess it's a bit random. I don't know. I don't know what the kind of prerequisite for that is necessarily, but
I think it broke through in the line again, because that also could stem from Melian,
That's a good point. That's a really good point. It could be Melian. And he's interesting because I want to say he's probably one of the sadder stories in the Second Age, if not Middle Earth at large, because you see your people collapsing. You see them abandoning the traditions of old and hating the people they once revered and loved. And there's nothing you can do about it. You try with all your might, and maybe you stave off the collapse of your civilization for a little while, but it's too bad when it's just one individual. He couldn't, he and his faithful, they weren't enough.
And it's not only that, but he made an epic prophecy, and he made the prophecy that when the white tree falls or gets chopped down or whatever, when the white tree dies, the line of king will end. So there's what. Again, creepy. Well, this is, because prophecies, men don't speak prophecies, Glorfindel, he's not a man, he's an elf. At that point, he was even more than a regular elf because he was re-embodied, so he could speak a prophecy. But somebody like Melkor, he tried to doom Húrin, but or Mandos, or these people do that. It's not like, a regular, it's not like hobbits curse somebody
Actually, well, Frodo kind of curses Gollum. He says, if you touch me one more time, you're going into the fires of Mount Doom.
But he was hoping that Eru would help him.
Absolutely.
But seriously, like, making such a prophecy is kind of creepy.
I mean, I noticed something interesting. Looking at like the ages that they were when they passed away, I want to say Tar-Palantir was the last. He may have been like the last Numenorian or one of the last Numenorians here of the line of kings to outlive Aragorn. He lived to be 220. Aragorn lived to be 210. Interesting. Elendil and his line, they may have still had longer lives. I'm not completely sure. Elendil definitely did, but
I guess so. And so he was the 24th king. And as you said, he tried to reinstate, and it's interesting because the faithful were the ones who were banished, right? And the kingsmen, so this is what, the followers of the bad kings were, the court of the bad kings, and the
Yeah.
followers in Numenor were called the kingsmen, because the kings, they morally declined, and they were the baddies, and the faithful were the good ones. But now a faithful becomes king, and the kingsman, like this
Yeah.
interesting. So he doesn't, go well along with the kingsman at that time. But yeah, you can see, I wondered why there was never like a true rebellion or uprising against him, because in a way, how Tolkien then describes, Ar-Pharazôn at that time, he was very popular amongst the people, right? He was a great leader of armies, commander. He was popular, not being the king, but just being, what was he, like his cousin or something like that? Yeah, cousin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, cousin. Yeah, because he was Gimilcad's son, and Gimilcad
Is
was the
Tar-Palantir's brother.
brother.
Yeah.
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 So interesting.
Yeah. Do you
That
feel
he
like?
didn't.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I was gonna say, do you feel that Tar Miriel's story is also one of perhaps the saddest in the Second Age? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think she was? Because the thing is, the queens are really, really weak, and they don't want to rule very often in here. The,
Yeah.
the Numenorian queens, they're like, nah, not really interested. I'd rather live with my sheep, in the countryside. We don't know that much about Miriel. My
Yeah.
feeling is her father was such a good man, and she was raised, and I do think we don't know anything about her mother. I think she must also have been faithful, and I do think, Miriel would have, if she would have had the chance, I don't think she would have turned back to
Uh-uh.
the to evil. I think there would be potential there, but I think her problem was she didn't have the backing of the people. I think
Yeah.
Ar-Pharazôn had the backing of the people after the king died. I think that was the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it said that Tar Miriel strove, like she was trying to reach the peak of Menel Tarma before
Yeah,
the
at the
collapse.
end. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so a very sorrowful tale for her. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's a crazy amount of popularity that Ar-Pharazôn must have had amongst the
Hmm.
Numenorians. It shows how far gone that they were, that he could force his
Yeah.
cousin to marry him and abdicate the throne, and
Yeah.
still not lose the polls. We're both political
Yeah.
science people, but yeah,
Yeah.
not lose and not take a dip in the polls.
No.
It's
But I
too
do
bad.
think at that time, people, they were no longer in contact with the elves. The kings and leaders for centuries now
Yeah.
had told them, "Oh, why do the Valar forbid us to sail west?" There was even, one of the kings. He mentioned, "But Earendil, my ancestor, he
Yeah.
was allowed to go to Valinor. How am I not?" He literally used that argument, and people learned of that. They heard that. They knew that, and I think
Yeah.
again. The, I think the lifespan of them also shortened. So they did cling to anything. And then if this guy comes, and tells you, well, I'm going to marry my cousin, usurp the throne. Oh, by the way, this was mirroring something that happened ages, centuries before. There was Tarvanimelde, so the last ruling queen before
Yeah.
Miriel. Her husband also usurped the throne. She didn't really rule; he kind of ruled for her, and
Yeah.
then the son would have taken over after her death. But the husband, who was not in line of succession in any way, he usurped the throne as well. So very similar to
Yeah.
then what Ar-Pharazôn achieved, because people were ready for it then. I think, they cut him out of the annals of the kings, the Andukal guy, the guy
Yeah.
before. So people were not ready for, a guy usurping the throne, forcing the scepter and the crown on himself. And I think at that time people didn't really care anymore. They were like, okay, yeah, Ar-Pharazôn, good.
Yeah, I mean, the law of succession that it was established by Tar Aldarion, it's like
Yeah.
this was in place, and
Hmm.
um, I mean, yeah, I guess so many of the Numenorians were Kingsmen, which made sense because for a while the faithful had been leaving Numenor. Um,
Yeah.
it was just such an
Yeah, ships
overwhelming,
did
yeah.
sail. Yeah, ships did sail.
And perhaps it was almost a backlash, even like his popularity was almost a backlash of that unpopularity of Tar-Palantir. They were so ready for that, we had
Mhm.
our faithful
Yeah.
king. Now it's like, let's have our Kingsman king back.
Yeah, and
So
people don't
yeah,
really like change, right? Again, you and
yeah,
I studied politics, so it is really, and you're like, oh God, a new government. Like, okay, now
yeah,
everything changes. People don't
yeah,
really like that, and nothing bad actually happened. What did the people see for centuries? These greedy kings made them richer. Yes,
yeah,
maybe their lifespans declined, but all this colonization and robbing Middle Earth
yeah,
basically made them richer.
absolutely,
So they, why would they, go with somebody who says, "Oh no, let's be very humble now. Let's start
yeah.
speaking, Elvish again. Let's do." People are like, why? Not really.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. They're affected on that like personal wealth level, and
yeah,
I mean, there's also that chaotic element. People don't like the change when things are going really well, but there's also the
yes,
chaotic element within people politically when the
yeah,
pendulum swings back and forth. It's like, oh, we just had a very faithful kind of king who's
yes,
not as imperialistic. Let's have a very now imperialistic king, and it
yeah,
goes back and forth, and it's really
it's
too
true.
bad.
Yeah. And well, and Sauron came, which
Yep.
also
Yeah, that
kind
doesn't
of,
help.
makes, no, it doesn't help. It does make a difference because all of a sudden now we have a Temple of Doom where they
Yeah.
basically, and this is
Oh
what I
no.
want to see on my home screen, Amazon.
Oh no.
Make this happen, Jeff. I want to see faithful being burnt alive in the Temple of Doom, and I want.
I can hear like the excitement in your voice.
Kind of,
Oh. No, it's
but
got to be. I mean, if they're going to do the story justice, they have to do it justice. They have to go like I know Nerd of the Rings. Shout out to Matt, our friend.
mhm.
He was talking about how the rating of the show is like 13,
Oh,
14 years old or something.
14, yeah. Mhm.
When they get to that season, though, it's got to be like rated R or whatever, like rated. Oh man,
Although I saw Squid Game was rated 15. Maybe that's
really?
just, or six, yeah, I think 15 or something like that, because a friend of mine, who has two boys, and he told me that, yeah, that he was surprised because he was like, okay, so my kid would be allowed to watch this, but I don't want him to see Squid Game. I don't, have you seen
Yeah.
it?
No, I've heard about the gratuitous violence though. Like, I know how it's. Wow, really? Only
That doesn't even come close to what's happening there. It's like, and I mean, I've seen a lot, and I don't mind splatter horror movies.
sure.
Give it to me, but no, this was horrendous. Like, yeah, if you don't have strong nerves, don't watch it, Yoystan.
Wow.
Anyway,
But no, we got it. We'll have to see that in end of the Second Age, like with Sauron. It's horrific.
it's happening, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sauron, yeah, basically, I mean, what you the thing is, you see the king being reluctant in the beginning, and also he didn't cut down the tree right from the get-go, because Sauron
Yeah.
tried to do this for a long time, right? Made him cut down the tree. He didn't because he knew of the prophecy, and I do
Yeah.
think he kind of believed Palantir, and so yeah, that was kind of interesting. But then in the end, he
Cuts
was,
it down.
yeah,
It's one of my favorite Isildur stories, though, is him stealing the sapling at like almost the cost of his life. That was meant that much to him. I think that may have really
yeah,
influenced the Valar to see, okay, we have to save these people.
yes.
But when we sink the island, these all people can go.
Yeah, I mean, somebody commented under one of my videos and said, like, this god is really so evil and so bad. There were so many, people that drowned because what 7 ships or 6 ships made it
Yeah,
out. So the thing is, like, how can a god allow this? But then again, because the king was bad. But then again, it wasn't just the king. It was the whole society
It
was,
was.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it
I mean,
wasn't just good
became
people.
Tolkien's Noah's Ark. It's like we gotta
Yeah,
just best thing we can do is just restart, like wash away all of these people.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean, for Eru, who's very compassionate, generally speaking, to get to that
yeah,
point, it's a lot. It's a lot. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah,
And I love that Ar-Pharazôn doesn't get a real death, and I really find that fascinating. So his ship
yeah,
could just drown, right?
yeah.
That would also be an epic end. You would be like, yeah, he deserves this,
Oh yeah,
drown, mofo, right?
yeah,
But 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 no, he doesn't. He reaches the the shores,
yeah.
basically, of the undying lands, and then the caves and the mountains and the rocks basically collapse, and
Yeah.
he's in that cave maybe forever now. We don't know. I mean, obviously we know men die, but this is a very symbolic. We have, I think I'd said that in another stream, we have something like that in Germany as well. We have a king who lives under the mountain, and whenever the Germans need him in the dire time of need, ravens will come and tell him, okay, now you need to rise again and help your people.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's called, the mountain is called the Kyffhäuser, and the king was King
Hmm.
Barbarossa, which means red beard. But
Yeah.
this is in our mythology, and this very much reminded me, because he was basically, like in this mountain. But I don't think anybody will call Ar-Pharazôn to aid. But
I,
Dagor Dagorath. I
yeah,
don't know.
I think that's what it was. It's like his armies will stay there until Dagorath, and
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
So
so
they are not dead.
yeah, and it's a good distinction to make to correct something I said earlier. It's all Eru that takes down Numenor
Yeah.
and takes down Ar-Pharazôn and his company, because the
Yeah.
Valar, in their wisdom, like you say, Ulmo could have just come up and smashed his ship, but he
Yeah.
doesn't.
No.
Instead, they let the ships arrive to Numenor, and then because they didn't want to touch the children of Eru, they knew how bad that would be if
Yeah.
they killed the children of Eru.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to Amondiel, by the way. I don't know if they killed him, but apparently these children they couldn't, and so Eru saw to them. But I
Yeah.
want to say, yeah, Dagorath.
Yes. Yeah. And that is such a cool and symbolic, many people say it's not canon. For me, it is canon.
Yeah,
Because so many all the important characters
yeah,
in his legendarium show up, your boy, Turin.
yeah, yes. He gets the kill shot on Melkor.
Damn it. I'll hate
That's
this
sweet.
forever because
That's
because
awesome.
because who deserves it? Fingolfin deserves it. Like the last stab. Sorry.
That's
Was
fair.
it bloody Turin? Like, no,
I
not
mean,
okay.
Turin, his life, he just like so much bad stuff had happened. Obviously, Melkor did a lot of bad things to Fingolfin, but Turin, that one was for his sister wife that
Yeah.
like
Okay.
like
Yuck.
I mean, committed suicide because of the dragon and what the dragon said. Like that one
Yeah.
was for his father. That one was for
Okay,
his,
good.
for me that's a very symbolic end. All of the evils
Okay.
done to him, he could end Melkor forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I say, I always loved when I first read that end of Ar-Pharazôn. I was like, this is
Mhm.
so cool, actually, that
Yeah.
they don't get killed and just drown, and that's the end. And
It,
so
it,
that is. Mhm.
it kind of mirrors Feanor, like his return too in the
Yes.
Dagorath, because you have
Yeah.
Feanor who turned against the Valar, you have Ar-Pharazôn who turned against the Valar.
Yeah.
Both commanded amazing respect, but were pretty evil in their own right.
Hmm.
Yet the Valar would have need of them in the very end, both of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last battle.
The last battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about how many, 22 ruling kings. We didn't mention all of them, but the names are really weird people.
Yeah, I find that, like, I find this whenever I make a video about the kings of Gondor, Rohan, or Arnor. It's like, a lot of them, or most all of them, have names, but not all of them did something. It's like this person
Yeah.
ruled from here to here. So if
Yeah.
anyone is curious to know about the full lineage, plenty of
Yeah.
lists out there and
Yes.
family trees. But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And again, if we don't know anything about them, the name foretells you, like the
Mhm.
Mithril guy. So he loved Mithril. Okay,
Yeah.
well, then you can just assume what he did. He dig for Mithril, most likely. And I guess he was maybe the one who also brought it to Middle Earth. Maybe, them and the dwarf. Who knows?
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
be also interesting to see that. Maybe the series will also pick up something like that with a dwarf connection. Because I always like these things, like how are swords forged,
Yeah.
because there goes also knowledge, magic, wisdom, a lot goes into this. And yeah, I like these metals of the worlds and the gemstones and all that. That was always important for Tolkien. So
Yeah.
otherwise he wouldn't have given it specific names.
I mean,
So it's cool.
imagine what they could have made with Mithril, the Numenorians making with Mithril. Yeah.
And also it made them rich, probably. I think they
Oh, totally.
traded with it. Yeah, pretty sure they
Totally.
traded with it. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, they're weapons of Mithril, so no orc, no nothing could harm
Yeah.
them. Maybe they have. Who knows?
It would make sense because they
Yeah.
utterly defeated Sauron like every time they fought him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, true. And what I really want to see to come back for the last thing for the show, I really want to see the Guild of Mariners because I always find these guilds. I obviously want to see
Yeah.
Ostinethil with the smithing guild of Eregion and Celebrimbor, but I also want to see the shipping guild,
Me
and
too.
I do think we will see that. And
Honestly, even like an episode of a standalone episode of the Guild
yeah,
of Mariners and of Aldarion and his
love
adventures
that.
and his romance and all of that.
No, I would love that. I have a video with Redbook with
Yeah.
Stephen on Aldarion and Erendis, and we talk quite, I don't know, for hours about that topic and the guilds and everything. And I think that is a very cool contrast, to how Numenor was, and then that also symbolized their, uprising as an industrialized, gearing up nation, because it wasn't just ships to explore the world. They also
Yeah.
started building warships,
Yep.
because they helped and aided Gil-galad because he was asking them to. So it wasn't just to explore the world and sail
Yeah.
around the world. No, those were warships as well.
Yeah. There was a really tall ship that he built too, right? It was like
Yes, it had a
a tower.
name. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There were several names. Tolkien and this is in the so everybody who hasn't read it, the Aldarion and Erendis story. It's like, I don't know, 30 pages or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's really good. It's one of my favorite parts because the characters are really fleshed out, which you
Yeah.
normally don't have.
Yeah, it's in the Unfinished Tales,
Yes.
but it's always the Unfinished Tales that I love the stories, but then they just end like the best part, right? Tours riding for
No.
Gondolin, and then it's like,
I
oh, that's
know.
it. It's like,
That is
oh,
the worst. That is literally the
oh
worst. I'm like, I want to know everything about that. And you're saying,
yeah,
come on. I mean, this needs to happen in our lifetime. Do this. Imagine Yoystan doing this.
yeah.
But this is seriously in my lifetime. I want to have a show about Gondolin. This is
Me
like the best
too.
thing ever.
Me too. That'd be incredible to see that on
Yeah.
screen.
With
Oh,
12 houses. So which house are you, Yoystan?
oh, which
House
house
of
are you?
the mole. Your house of the
How,
mole.
how dare no? That's pretty sweet. Which fought with the hammers like this?
Oh yeah, the guy. What was his name? The guy with the hammer.
I can't remember. It's been too long since I've read.
Brock, or
Yeah,
something like.
that's awesome. No,
You're
I don't know.
literally him. You're literally him.
All right, yeah, we'll stick with that. Again,
I'll
I'm
add a
like
picture of you. I'll put his picture above
hammer.
the tree thingy.
That's
Makes
amazing.
sense.
Yeah, which are you?
Makes sense. I think I would be either Glorfindel's house or
Yeah,
Excellion. I think
that's what I was about to
Excellion.
say. Yeah, no, I could see that. Excelion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love him. Rip.
yeah. I just made a video on Orcrist. Do you think Ecthelion was the first bearer of Orcrist?
Yes, I say that in
Yeah.
my video. I have a top 10 elven warrior list,
Yeah.
and he is number 4, I think. And yes, I think it's his.
Yeah. Awesome.
I would
Awesome.
say, yeah, I would say because it makes sense because all them they which they found stem from Gondolin, and
Yeah.
would make sense. It's his.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the mate of Torgon, so it must have been higher up
Yeah,
with like
yeah.
his houses. And yeah, no,
Yeah,
super.
yeah. And they were the last ones, who had the last stand at the fountain at the
Yeah,
square of the king. And I think, whenever, the city collapsed or whatever, and those were the swords this is my
that's true.
headcanon
That
they
makes
found.
sense.
Yeah.
Both of those. Do you think Sting belonged to Eärendil?
I would love that.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Tiny little thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then Idril was like, let's run, let's make a
Yeah.
run.
He dropped
So
it or something. Yeah.
yeah. Yes. Good.
Yeah,
So
very good.
I think we're
Yeah,
at the end, people. I really enjoyed this as
me too.
always. Houston will definitely one day come back. I think
Absolutely.
we'll be both a bit busy. The next, we hope some trailers will drop. We hope some more
Yeah.
information about the show will come out. I think you're also excited, right? You're one
Oh,
of the
yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm
yes.
overall excited. Like I'm excited to get something new. Yeah.
Same, and it doesn't have to be like this. It's not the movies, it's not the books, it's
Yep,
something different.
it
And
is.
yeah, as you say, I'm excited for new content. Obviously, I can be critical, but I'm
Yeah.
not like shout out to Nerdtronic and his followers.
Yeah.
Like I'm not like woke BS and what like I
Yeah.
mean let's see it first. We haven't even seen like the trailer or footage we got was Galadriel speaking for like I don't know 2 sentences. So
Yeah,
let's
we can't really
watch.
make out too much from that. Yeah.
No, no. I'm
Well,
happy we get some more footage.
me too. Well, Helen, thank you so much for having me back. I can't wait for our next conversation. These collabs with you are always so much fun.
Yes, they are. And for everybody who doesn't know Yoystan, what are you doing with your life? Subscribe to his channel, but I don't think who am I speaking to? That is not possible. So, my lovelies, bye bye. Till the next one.